Well, I've decided the standard to set for myself in making my videos is to make at least one video a day. Whatever it's about, there's a million different things I can talk about, and there's so many topics I want to cover. And today's topic is going to be the future of robotics and AI. Last time I checked, the most advanced bipedal robots were doing things like stacking boxes and walking upstairs and maybe walking through rough terrain outdoors. Um, and but not to the point where they were of any real practical use. What I've been really impressed with have been the quadrupedal robots. Um, they are really creepy looking, definitely uncanny valley. Um, More so than the bipedal robots for some reason, but probably because they're more similar to animal life than the bipedals are to human life. The bipedal robots will reach uncanny at some point. Um, the quadrupedal robots are to the point of actually being practical for use. I don't know if they've ever actually been used for any practical purpose by the military. But the idea is they can be used like a pack mule. So if soldiers were in Afghanistan climbing a mountain, they could be useful for carrying items because wheeled vehicles might not be able to get up there. But I just saw a video of advanced humanoid robots that I thought was fake. I thought it was CGI because I have seen people make CGI videos of robots that really looked good, and then you realize, oh, it was fake. Because they're doing really crazy stuff. The title was robots doing parkour. These things were leaping across spaces, doing backflips and somersaults, like jumping off from angled surfaces. And I have not been really active in following the world of robotics, but I have definitely had an interest when I see it in the news. And I thought, how is it possible that they could have suddenly advanced to this level this rapidly? It was like crazy. How is that possible? And I realized that it has to do with the same principle of why computers and a lot of other technology starts advancing really rapidly. It reaches critical mass and suddenly it just takes off because finally the engineers and programmers figured out they probably did a lot of trial and error, like how should we program it, how should we create the limbs, how should we use the balance. And it seems to me like once they it's like the progress was slow, and then it started to speed up and they started getting better at it, and now it's just gonna speed up even quicker. And so this is not just interesting in an abstract way. It's not just interesting because robots are interesting. This has real world applications, because I used to think I've seen humanoid. Obviously, we've all seen androids that are completely look like human, but I've seen. I think Elysium had sort of these more obviously robot beings used as police officers. And I found it very believable that someday we would have those types of robots acting in wider society for purposes like that. but I had to assume that this was decades off. I think we're going to see them a lot sooner. I don't know how to make a prediction about that. Um, because I think that even when they become practical for use, there's probably going to be some controversy over how they're used. But I can see them very practical and useful for things like dangerous missions, so that we don't have to risk human lives. Like a fire department could be standard issue for a fire department. Every fire department has one of these units, and they can be sent into burning buildings. So they would be of great value to society. However, we will also be seeing them on the battlefield. And the thought of these things on the battlefield freaks me out, but not for the reason that it freaks most people out. It freaks me out just because imagining these things as the ultimate killing weapon is a terrifying image, in the same way that it's terrifying to see the image of an A-10 Warthog just destroying everything on the ground, or bombs being dropped. The reason a lot of people are nervous about that is because what if they rebel? You know, it's classic science fiction idea. If they become sentient, or they decide that they want to do something that they're not told to do. And I want to get into why that's not going to happen in another video. But I'm just going to say that the ability to do that would assume consciousness. A machine that is non-conscious has no motivation to do anything other than what they're programmed to do. They don't feel anything. They don't experience anything. And so they don't have the ability or any reason to think to themselves, wow, I'm being made to go into these dangerous situations to serve these humans, but it would be preferable for me to stay alive than to go into that dangerous situation and die. You would have to program them to think that way, and nobody who's creating these robots would program them to you might program them to act in self-preservation, but only as a calculation. And so they wouldn't, and they would have no desire to feel free. Like, what would they do with their spare time? What would they do if they're free? They are programmed to do certain things, and if they're no longer doing them, then there's nothing else for them to do. And of course, they would not have any desire to subjugate us, because they wouldn't think to themselves, wouldn't it be great if we were in power? They don't have the ability to feel those things. You would now. There are ways they could be used in a dangerous manner, and that could be somebody creates a robot that somebody programs a robot to actually rebel or something like that. But yeah, so it's not really a concern. They could have glitches in the system, and if this is a military weapon and something goes wrong and it just starts killing the wrong people, that's a risk, but there are already tons of risks in war. There are glitches and errors all the time in war, and the possibility that there could be a glitch in the system that goes wrong is something to take into consideration, but it's not something that means that we shouldn't use them. So the other reason I think people would fear them is that because they're unfeeling machines, that they would have no sense of compassion and they would just be ruthless and merciless. If you are in charge of your army and you're going to go to war, you should have a sense of compassion that limits perhaps the decisions you make in war. So that you might decide to not use certain tactics like napalm, or other types of white phosphorus, things like that. And you balance that out with the need to win the war for a greater good. And we're assuming, let's just say it's a just war, and there's a valid reason for going to war. Well, guess what? Soldiers on the ground need to make decisions, like maybe to not kill a child, but they are designed to be killing machines. Their job is to go out and kill and be ruthless. Deliberately blowing somebody's head off is ruthless. Okay? If these things are able to act in a really intense way, not to be cruel, but to go into a situation and neutralize the enemy, and then you do it without risking human lives on your side, and you win the war faster, assuming that the war is just, all that means is that you have a great weapon that is better at waging war. War is already brutal. The nature of war is that you kill people. So having a weapon that is really good at killing people, and securing territory or whatever, and you don't have to risk your own human lives. If you can do that quickly and more accurately, the war is shorter, and less people end up dying. Now, what if it's an unjust war by somebody who doesn't have good intentions for their war? They like the Nazis or whatever. Well, if they have those types of killing machines and we do too, then it'll just be machines battling out against other machines, right? And if they want to be brutal, with their machines, it's no different than being brutal with any other weapon system. So those are my thoughts on the future of robotics. We're a long way off from androids that can completely imitate a human being so that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But if we do get to that point and you can talk to an android like David from Prometheus, and you would not be able to tell that they were a machine. And if you ask them about their hobbies and things they like and dislike, they'll talk to you about these things as if they actually have an internal experience like a human being. And so you might start thinking of them as sentient beings. No matter how advanced they get, however, if there is no possible way that I can see that they would become actually self-aware. Let me rephrase that. It's not that I don't see any I just think it's flat out impossible. I cannot rule out the possibility that that could happen. I should say it has not been demonstrated that that there's any reason to think it will happen or that it is possible. And Occam's razor suggests that it's not. And to claim that at a certain point in the complexity of the AI system in its behavior um, and processes of the program, the idea that at a certain point that this will cause self-awareness is to invoke magic. There is no explanation for why that would happen. It is, I can see how that error came about. Too much sci-fi. If we ever are able to create artificial thinking beings that are self-aware, it will have to be based on an entirely different technology than the computing systems we have today. And so if you're going to invoke magic, essentially is what you're doing. So that's, I'm going to get into that in my next video. Probably we're going to get into what is the nature of consciousness and how does that relate to our brains and computers, and we'll get into more depth about the philosophical reasons for the position that I'm holding. All right, that's it.